Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Two Credits Podcast. I'm Ari,
And I'm Taylor.
and today we're going to start off by talking about the drama surrounding Epic. So, if you haven't heard, Epic decided that they were going to, like, make a way to pay for V-Bucks and other purchases for Fortnite through their own payment provider. Like, they're providing the whole payment solution instead of the platform holders. So, especially on mobile, this is a big deal because, for the most part, Google and Google and Apple require you to pay through them. They have their own payment providing solutions, and they want you to pay through them, and they get like 30% off the top. But Epic decided to go ahead and say, screw that. You can pay through us, and we will give you 20% off. And obviously, when you have the two options of here's a $10 purchase or here's an $8 purchase, everyone's going to choose the $8 purchase. It means nothing to them which way they pay. They just want the 20% discount. So it existing was a problem in the first place, but they definitely went out of their way to make sure that they pissed off platform holders in the process. And the obvious result is that they got removed from the Google Play and iOS app stores. And as a result, they then immediately, and I really do mean immediately and publicly, launched a lawsuit on both companies right after each of the removals happened. And it's kind of been a crazy saga, hasn't it? It's like they
Yeah.
they did that, and then they did the whole thing with the 1984 ripoff thing in Fortnite, 1980 Fortnite or whatever. And I mean, they were ready. They were very ready.
Yeah. And it's kind of funny because it almost seems like they had somebody just sitting there waiting because they knew that they were going to get kicked off both of the stores. It was like they had someone sitting there waiting to tweet out their legal papers or whatever, like immediately, because weirdly they just straight up were like, "Yeah, we're suing Apple. Here's a link," and then you can just read all the papers. And same for the Google Play Store. And it was really fast by all parties too, because it was like I'm pretty sure it was only like a couple of hours to get kicked off the App Store, and it took a while longer to get off of Google Play, which is weird. But it's just crazy, right? Like because they obviously knew what was going to happen because they had all this ready. So clearly they were intending to get kicked off of both the stores to make a point. But I don't know, it seems like kind of an insane amount of money to be voluntarily walking away from, right? Because presumably on Android, if you want and if you seek it out, you can still download Fortnite and sideload it. But on iOS, there's no way to get Fortnite anymore. And I believe people have been saying eventually the app for Fortnite on iOS, because it can't get updated anymore, is just going to stop working. And I think that may or may not have already happened. I'm not sure. I saw some people saying they couldn't play already, so I'm not sure if that was related to that or not. But like, they're clearly trying to take on these companies to get a way around having to be on their stores and having to give up that 30% cut. And for Apple, it seems like they kind of have a point, because on iOS, your option is you go on the App Store and you give up 30%, or you don't get to have an app on there at all. Whereas on Android, you don't actually have to use the Google Play Store. There's the Samsung Store, there's the Amazon one, or you can just do your own thing by sideloading it. So, I don't know, it's interesting, right?
Yeah, well, the main thing with Android is that they say that basically they've tried to negotiate deals with people that make the phones themselves, and
Yes.
they have not been able to because Google has blocked those deals. And that's the difference
Yeah.
there. But
Yeah, because Google can just say like they have the ultimate leverage, even though they're not in as much control as Apple. It was with OnePlus, I think, that they said they wanted to, I think, have like an Epic launcher pre-installed on those phones. But I'm not sure exactly what happened, obviously. But Google can just say like, well, we can't stop you from releasing an Android phone, but we can disallow you from having any of our Google services stuff on there, so no Play Store, etc., which would be really bad. So obviously, for the most part, they have like the ultimate leverage, right?
Yeah. And also, on that note, you did say that that's an insane money to be an insane amount of money to be walking away from. But the thing that I'm more concerned with is like, okay, there's the whole money aspect of it, but there's a non-trivial amount of users that's on Android and iOS for Fortnite,
Yeah,
and
for
there's
sure.
been a lot of studies in recent times that have said basically like even a day of no service can be killer for a game,
Yeah.
especially a game of this size. So depending on how long this blackout lasts on iOS, this could be a non-trivial amount of users that they never get back just because they don't
Well,
trust that it won't go out again.
yeah, and think about it. Like, how long would a lawsuit like this take? It's not going to be over anytime soon unless they settle, because if neither side wants to, like, if both sides don't want to settle because they can't reach some kind of agreement, then it'll work like it always does, where eventually, after an insane amount of time, one side wins, and then there's an appeal, and then another side wins, and then there's an appeal, or whatever. So it'll take forever for this to even get, like, resolved one way or another. And obviously, they think that they have a chance to win. Otherwise, they would never have done this because it was so carefully planned out. So obviously, but I don't know. Like, it seems crazy. It's just, it seems crazy to be willing to risk this much. And it almost to me seems like either they think that Fortnite is still going to be a huge thing in like 10 years, or they're doing this with the hopes of not having to give out 30% for future endeavors, right?
Yeah.
But it's kind of crazy to do that in my mind, because can you really expect to have a product as successful as Fortnite ever again? I don't think you can rely on that, right?
No,
But
and
they're giving up
Riot's.
all...
I was just
Yeah,
gonna say, and
sorry, go
Riot's
ahead.
feeling the pain of that right now with Valorant not reaching nearly the levels that League did.
Yeah, because even like the best, like the companies that have like all the biggest stuff have a hard time like maintaining that forever, right? Like I'm trying to think like Riot, yeah, for sure. Like Teamfight Tactics still pretty popular, things like that, but nothing as much as League. And then I don't know, I can't even think of any others. Minecraft, like, can you really expect to have that again? That sort of thing. But they're so willing to throw away all these users and all this money, right? In the short term, because presumably they think it'll be worth it for them later on. But I feel like later on is probably years from now, at least for iOS, right?
Yeah, and also it's crazy to me because they're not seeking any kind of like payment from either of these companies. They're just asking that they don't have to go through their payment providers. Like that's literally it. It's such a crazy lawsuit because they're spending a ton of money in the hopes that they just never have to pay that 30% again. And
Yeah.
it it's unprecedented in a way, and I mean I feel like in a way there's a chance that it could be over quickly because depending on how this goes in the very short term, Epic may just cave again. I mean, it's not like they hadn't already caved on Android, and people have been very quick to note that. But it
Yeah.
it could happen, but also we could see some other like authority within the court system step up and be like, okay, well, you shouldn't be able to do this because the the thing that Epic has cited is back when Microsoft was forced to do the same thing for Windows because of Windows PCs becoming so essential to daily life, and that's kind of the case that Epic is making now. Like, well, this happened once, it can happen again, and it remains to be seen whether or not that will play out the way they want it to. But it is a stronger case than I expected.
Yeah. Like for me, I can see the merits of the argument against Apple, because it kind of makes sense to me that, as much as it is their platform, they make the hardware, they make the operating system, like it's their thing. I still don't necessarily think they should be able to say your app has to be on our store or it can't be on our platform at all. Whereas with Android, it seems a little, less clear. Like, I know there's definitely the argument against Google shouldn't be able to block you from making those kinds of deals like they were trying to make to get their launcher on, pre-installed on phones like the OnePlus line or whatever. But with regards to the store, I think it's kind of a shaky argument to say like that they can't set their own cut because it's their store. So I don't know. But it's also just crazy. Like it's crazy how planned out it is, and it's kind of crazy how they seem to want to get the community on their side. Like they've obviously are trying to go for that because they're making it so public, and they had a whole marketing campaign about it with the 1984 thing, and I'm sure they'll probably have more. So I wonder, maybe they're hoping that just people in the community will be mad and direct their anger at Apple and Google, but I don't know how much that's really going to do.
I mean, on the other hand, though, they're kind of a weird company if you think about it. Like, their entire goal, and they started an entire platform, the Epic Game Store, just to challenge Steam's cut. It had nothing to do with, like, being on Steam. They were challenging Steam's cut. And that was the way they framed it. And now they have
Yeah.
a store that's just continuing to go because Steam still hasn't been toppled. And now they're challenging the cuts from Google and from Apple. And it's a weird thing to see them openly spending money on challenging industry norms. And people can be as cynical about it as they want. They're a business. They eventually have to make more money. But the question I have perpetually is, do they though? Because I don't know how much money they're spending in relation to how much they're making. This could be like a drop in the pond that they're actually spending compared to what they make every day. And they could be doing this simply because they're anti-establishment or whatever. It may not be as simple as, oh, they're doing this for like selfish reasons because they don't want to pay it. Like, it may not be that simple, but it may also be that simple. I mean, it's just a crazy thing to
Yeah.
think that we genuinely don't know what they're doing, but the overall, like, what's going to happen from it if it goes their way is going to be positive for the industry, regardless. And that's why I hate that I see a lot of people that are like, well, fuck Epic for doing this, because I'm like, but the end result is going to be good for everyone, no matter what happens.
Yes.
Like, why?
Well, you have people. I see people making the same dumb arguments as they did with PC, in my opinion, where at least on iOS, where they're like, "Oh, but I don't want there to be another store I have to use to download apps from," because they're just dumb and they don't care about the reality of it. That giving up 30% of Fortnite money or whatever is an insane amount of money to have to pay just to be on that store, when really they could probably be on any store and people would still download it. But anyway.
And then I also wanted to touch on, okay, so Ars Technica, I think it was, put out an article where they said that Epic's war on closed platforms was very notably excluding PlayStation 4, Xbox One, etc. And
Yeah.
my counterpoint to that is that they're missing the point entirely. So first off, these are not mandatory systems. They're gaming systems. So Epic's entire lawsuit is framed around the idea that phones are essential to daily life now. Your PS4 and your Xbox One and your Switch are not essential to daily life. Therefore, it's not the same argument in the first place. But second off, in a more broad sense, iOS and Android are both open platforms in the sense that you can develop for them. Anyone can develop anything for either platform. Whether or not you can get it on the platform afterwards may require a little more closed, like, closed environment, like finagling on the part of iOS, but anyone can develop an app for these platforms. And
Yeah.
that is not true of PS4, Switch, and Xbox One. There's a whole bunch of other gatekeeping involved. You don't even get a hold of the software to make these, much less the hardware, without approval. And so there is a whole other set of, like, criteria that have to be met before you can even make the argument that Epic is making for these platforms. Like, there's a whole other set of considerations, and I think that's missing the point to say that they're not going after them, and so therefore they're not going after, like, the entirety of closed platforms. Because
But Yeah, but also like think about it this way as well. They are already working on two very high profile that are lawsuits that are going to take a long time and be very expensive to resolve. Like how many are they supposed to be willing to take on at one time? Like can you imagine like they're already in like they've already filed suit against Google and Apple and people want them to take on three more potentially lawsuits against Nintendo, Sony, and Microsoft. That would be insane. But also, going off of that, like if they win these two, or if they win even one of these two, then that could help them to make a case against something else as well, right? So, but like just in any case, it would be crazy to have five of these lawsuits. Like it's already crazy that they have. It'd be crazy if they had just one, and it's even more crazy that they have two. But can you imagine taking on five of these huge lawsuits at one time? Like that is crazy. That is insanity. The amount of money that would cost, like there, and you know who knows if doing something like that would end up with like, what if Fortnite got pulled off of PS4? What if Fortnite got pulled off of Xbox? Like they can't take on everything at once. That is insane to expect.
I mean, but also they did this thing on all platforms where you get the 20% off, and I'm 90% sure that they have not been pulled off of any of the console stores yet. Like,
I
the
wasn't
console stores have just completely allowed them to exist with this.
I wasn't sure that they did it on consoles too. That's
Well, I'm
interesting.
pretty sure they did it on consoles. They did it on PC even. I mean, why wouldn't they do it on consoles?
Yeah, that's fair. I just think it might hurt them. I don't know. But it's a big deal for sure. And I don't think anyone really expected this. And it was cool to see it go down in a way because first I don't remember what the messaging was at the very start of the discount. They said it was like a permanent discount, right? By going through their payment thing for on the V-Bucks.
Yeah.
So they came out and said there's going to be this crazy permanent discount on V-Bucks, which I'm sure already got everyone all excited because of how big Fortnite is, right? Like I don't even play it that much, and I considered buying some V-Bucks because of that. But and then from there, like everyone was wondering, like how can they even do that? Like what are they thinking? How can they just do that on iOS and Android? How can they subvert Apple and just do it? Like I don't even know how they snuck that past the app review or whatever, the review process that it has to go through before going live on the store. But they did, and then we were all just wondering like what is going to happen. Of course they have to, like Apple has to pull it off, right? And then they did so soon, and then we're all just like, well, what's like they had to know that they were going to get pulled off, right? And clearly they did. I don't know, it's just crazy.
Yeah. I mean, now comes the worst part, though, where we have to sit here and wait for anything else to happen.
It's gonna be. I really think it's gonna be a long time. I think it will be a very long time before something like this gets resolved in any meaningful way. If it ends up going all the way to court, I don't see how that takes anything less than like years because I don't think any like either side would accept the outcome. If they have the ability to appeal, they're going to do that because I don't think either side is going to be happy with losing at this point, right? So
Yeah.
I don't know. It's going to take a long time, and that's going to be the hard part. But like, can you imagine if Fortnite isn't available on iOS or on the Google Play Store for like however many months or years this takes to resolve?
I don't even want to know what that's going to do to their numbers. No more free games. Our lawsuit killed them.
But it's kind of crazy too because they are working so hard all the time to retain people to Fortnite, right? That's why they do those massive changes all the time, why they have all those crazy events where you can like watch movies and all that stuff, why they have like crazy tie-ins, like what do they have, like Star Wars,
Aquaman, Deadpool.
Avengers, I think. They
At
have
one
didn't they
point,
have
yeah, they had an Avengers mode even.
like yeah, so like they do all this stuff very clearly designed to retain people, and like it seems like they're kind of throwing some of that away, which is just crazy to me with how much they like how hard they work on trying to keep things interesting so people don't leave.
I mean,
But
part of that might just be like overconfidence that if they can't play on this platform, they'll find another way to play.
that's true. But I think there's probably a decent number of people that play mobile that might not have another way to play it. But also that they might play less because if like there's lots of situations where you might have your phone and be able to play where you don't have access to something else and be able to play like at that time. So I wonder how hard this will hurt them in the short and long term.
Yeah, you have to wonder how calculated it was, or if it was just kind of a shotgun, like, let's just do it, and if it gets us in the end, who cares?
Yeah.
Anyways, with that talked about, let's move on to more Xbox news, which, the Xbox news is never ending these days. So the big one is that Halo Infinite got delayed, thereby killing the only exclusive they had for launch that I am aware of, which is very interesting, to say the least. I'm not really sure how they plan to recover from this. Their current messaging is that there will be thousands of playable games from across 4 generations on this console, but let's be honest, who's going to buy an Xbox Series X to play OG Xbox games? So, I mean, obviously Halo Infinite wasn't like the most appealing next gen title, but it getting delayed is kind of a big deal.
Yeah, because, in my mind, the way I see it is overall, the PlayStation 5 is already way more appealing, but they I can't think of anything off the top of my head that they have for like just straight up for launch that they had that I was really excited for. So the way I see it was like it seemed like Xbox Series X kind of had a fighting chance at the start because if they had Halo right away and the PlayStation 5 didn't have something like that right away, then maybe they could start, getting some momentum even though their exclusives overall seem to be, you know, not getting the attention that they might like. Whereas now, like now that they have nothing, it just seems like an easy choice to me. Like it doesn't even seem like a choice to of which console to get.
Yeah, and even weirder though, like they say that you're going to have all these games across 4 generations, but like let's be honest, most people are going to be looking to Game Pass, especially now that there are no exclusives for the Series X. So many of the Series X patches are going to be coming after launch, like the um what do they call it, like improved with Series X or whatever. Um
Oh, optimized for Series X or
Optimized for
something?
Series X, that's it. Yeah. So
Yeah.
there are so many of those patches are coming after launch. There are no exclusives, and people are going to be looking to Game Pass because it's their cheap way to play games that are Xbox exclusive, and the majority of those are going to be Xbox One games, right? You're not going to
Yes.
have a ton of like 360 and OG Xbox games at launch that are going to be available through Game Pass. And I'm not even sure how they're going to be available in general at this point because they just say they're going to be there and are a little non-specific about it. And just it's a very weird thing to be thinking about. The majority of the games that people that buy this are going to play are going to be from last gen.
Yeah. It
And
definitely is.
they're going to do it willingly because of Game Pass. Like such a weird thing. Like I don't even
Yeah, it just seems strange because I don't really know what their game plan is here because, I could be wrong, but it feels like all signs right now point to this being a heavily Sony dominated generation once again between the two. And I just feel like their best chance, in my mind, was because they had Halo, they might have a stronger start, which could help, maybe snowball into something and get them some momentum off the bat. But I feel like once the PlayStation 5 gets rolling, it's going to be too late. Like, I don't see any way with what they've talked about right now that they are going to have a slower start. Like, I anticipate them having a slower start. And I don't see how that will pick up later on, because you see it time and time again. The console that starts the strongest, usually, if it gets a big enough lead, is the one that maintains that lead for the rest of the generation, because just of how it snowballs. Because like, if all your friends get a PlayStation or whatever, you're probably not going to get an Xbox then, because then, for the most part, you're still not going to be able to play with them, or you'll be missing out on a lot of the games that they're playing and talking about. So I don't know. I understand that if Halo is not ready, it's not ready, but it's just crazy to me that it isn't ready. You know what I mean? It feels like they should have had their stuff ready.
But also, you have to think about, like, this is a very good indicator of how their generation is going to go, where they're just not even ready for it. And I feel like that's not going to change, because when you think about Sony, you think about the fact that they literally just ended a generation on Death Stranding, Ghost of Tsushima, and Last of Us 2, and we can't even get Xbox to start a generation strong. If they can't start it strong, where is it going to end? Like, is there going to be, like, one period of maybe 3 months where all of these games that we've been waiting for come out at once and then nothing? Like, how is this going to work?
Yeah.
I mean,
I don't know. It's just it's so unfortunate, because I actually tend to like the Xbox consoles a little more, but it feels like I never have a good reason to actually choose that one, or to even, like, this time around, with the way things are looking, I don't see any reason for me to get one ever, even later on, which is just, I don't know, it feels like there's never good news about Xbox at this point, like, for the next generation anyway.
Well, and the thing I didn't touch on is that the Halo Infinite news is actually even weirder, because during that bizarre Animal Crossing stream that for some inexplicable reason had both one of the Sprouse twins and Phil Spencer on it, and I will never understand how that came to pass, but in that stream, they revealed that Halo Infinite was delayed so that it wasn't split into multiple parts. And I don't even know what that means. They had never said anything about that previously. Like,
I forget who it was. There was somebody who seemed to have some kind of insider knowledge. I'm sorry, I honestly don't recall who it was, but somebody had been saying, if Halo comes out for, I think they said November, or for launch, or whatever it was, if Halo comes out this year, then it won't be with the multiplayer, I think is what they were saying, or that some aspect of the multiplayer would not be ready in time, from what they had heard. And this seems to maybe confirm that. Maybe that is what the problem was, and why it wasn't ready, is because they want, like, when they talk about splitting it into multiple parts, maybe they mean either some parts of the multiplayer, as in, like, some modes, or just the multiplayer in general, we're not going to be ready in time.
Well, see, that's not really inspiring, though, because I think when a lot of people heard that it was going to be delayed, what they were hoping for is that they were going to completely rework the way it looked and make it look more like a current-gen game. But to hear that they're delaying it because the recently announced, must I add, free-to-play multiplayer component wasn't going to be ready in time, like, that is not the delay you want to hear about in this case.
For sure. And the whole thing is just so bizarre. Like, I know that this year has been rough for a lot of companies because of COVID and everything, and it definitely hasn't gone the way that they had hoped. And I'm sure it's been very difficult on all the different teams trying to make games and stuff like that, because it's not an easy process to just have, like, a huge studio with all of a sudden everyone's trying to work from home, and you're trying to, like, whip together an environment where that can actually work. But it still just seems crazy to me that they seem so much less ready than, like, it seems like Sony for the most part is doing okay with keeping up with stuff. They've had a few delays, but in terms of next gen stuff, it seems like they're just right on schedule, whereas with Microsoft, it just feels like they're always behind on something.
I think it's actually a little ironic because Phil Spencer, I think it was the one that warned that early next year was when we were going to really start feeling the effects of COVID in the games industry. And here
Yeah,
we are, and they can't even make it that far.
yeah,
But, I mean, I don't know. I just feel like this has completely sealed Xbox's fate. And it's kind of going to be one of those things where, like, we've kind of got a similar situation to when the Xbox One was going to launch. I know that it saw a lot of backlash, but the whole online only aspect where you could share games in a similar manner to the way that Steam is doing now,
yeah,
except on a per game basis, which is what everyone wanted Steam to be doing, that was an appealing feature to me, right? But that was an appealing feature that was not backed by the games at the time. And
yeah,
so I feel like what we've got here is exactly the same thing, where we've got xCloud and we've got some of the other stuff, which are appealing features that are not backed by the games. And that seems to be Microsoft's thing. Thinking ahead without being able to just do the basic things.
yeah. And I keep saying this, but it feels like all those studios they picked up should have, started paying off by now, but they kind of aren't. Like I know that they will, but it feels like the move, if you can make it, is to buy a bunch of studios and then have them get stuff going and ready like much sooner than what all their stuff is going to be ready for, which seems to be like a lot of it doesn't even have a date, which means it's probably like, you know, not not this year, maybe even not next year. So that's a very far time away for me to care about if, whoever is going into GameStop and buying a console this winter. That's a long time away, and I don't think anybody is going to really care about that. They're going to care about what's available now.
And I mean, I haven't really touched on it, even though we've talked about this a lot, but the most baffling of all of these companies that just haven't been able to get their stuff out are Obsidian and Rare. And the reason for that is, like, what has Rare done recently other than, Sea of Thieves, which, I mean, I appreciate the updates that they're doing, but they're not, like, the most substantial updates,
Yeah,
consider, like, over time. And, like, maybe a little bit of development work on Battletoads. Like, I know they're involved, but, it's mostly being handled by another studio that I've never heard of. Um, so, I mean, what have they really been doing? They could have had another game ready, or at least it feels like they should have been able to. And Obsidian has just been constantly putting out games year after year recently, and we've got The Outer Worlds that just came out, and it feels like they should have had something to follow up with. Maybe it wouldn't have been Avowed, right? But it should have been something. There should have been something that they would have ready right in time for this launch, or at least it feels like that's the case. And there isn't.
yeah.
And I mean, I also am confused as to why Psychonauts 2 isn't done, obviously, but it's Double Fine, and my expectations of Double Fine are basically nothing at this point. So,
Yeah, I
um,
mean, Obsidian did have Grounded, but I feel like that didn't really turn out. That so far does not seem super promising to me. So,
well,
mm,
Grounded was a side project from like four or less people at the studio,
yeah,
so it's a completely different situation. But
yeah,
yeah, I'm just completely baffled as to why none of these have paid off. Like, they've bought so many studios, and none of them have a launch title. And now, not even Microsoft themselves have a launch title. And
yeah.
I don't know what is going on.
I don't know. I just don't know.
Anyway, so enough ragging on Microsoft for the millionth time. We're gonna move on
Until
to
next week.
yeah, until next week. So we're gonna move on to briefly. I want to mention that Origin Access and EA Access are now becoming EA Play, which is kind of an interesting move because like for a very long time, inexplicably, Origin Access was called Origin Access on PC because of the Origin client, whereas EA Access was on consoles. And now
Yeah,
they're going under the same branding, and this makes sense, but it's inexplicable why it took this long. And
Well,
They
EA Access was weird from the start because originally it was only on Xbox too, from what I remember. So,
Yeah, now it's on
like,
PS4, I think.
yeah, I'm pretty sure, yeah.
And
But
part
also, like, I don't know, like, did they say if the same subscription will kind of carry over as in terms of like, is it the same subscription for console and PC now, or is it still two different ones? Because I feel like that could be weird.
it does not say in the article, as far as I'm aware. Like, it doesn't specifically say that. But yeah, it would be weird to have the same subscription on multiple consoles that are separate. But I mean,
Or not, if it's called the same thing. Like, I feel like either way is kind of strange.
either way is very strange. But I feel like this is timed well though, because the thing is, it can't be called Origin Access anymore because they're putting it on Steam, which is
That's
also
true.
bizarre because it's weird to think that there's going to be a subscription service for someone else's games on Steam.
It's kind of weird that they're coming back to Steam at all. Like, it's been a very, very long time since they started up Origin, and it's been a bit shorter than that, that everything has been exclusive to Origin from EA. But I don't know, like, aside from Blizzard, they were pretty much the ones that were off of Steam the longest. So it kind of felt like, I don't know, like, my perspective would be that probably launching your own store and taking all your stuff off of Steam or whatever, that's probably hardest off the bat, and then after a while it probably levels out a bit. So it's strange to see them come back after all these years, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I know Battlefield 5 did terribly, but as far as I was aware, the rest of the games had done perfectly fine, including and especially Fallen Order. I thought had done perfectly fine. And I mean, EA, I always thought that they were one of those companies where most of their sales are on consoles anyways. Like,
Yeah, because they have all the sports games, or no, many of the sports games, not all, but
so I'm not entirely sure why it is that they decided to go back to Steam. If they just kind of like thought that there was no reason not to all of a sudden, or what, but
I mean, there is the fact that the cut is a bit lower now at a point, so that might help with that decision.
that is true. That might have encouraged them to come back. But like, there are a lot of people that were pointing to it, like, oh, look at the like tens of thousands of people that are playing Star Wars: The Old Republic on Steam right now, and I'm just sitting there like, okay, and there are probably tens of thousands out of the 275 million people that play Steam or use Steam that were stupid enough to not just download another platform. You know, like, it's not surprising to me. But
But it's kind of crazy too, because they're bringing over Apex as well, like a free to play thing. So they're probably, I guess, going to be giving up, like, for in game purchases. If it's on Steam, I feel like Steam would have to take a cut, right? Because
no,
they're
they don't
not
have to.
gonna just.
There are tons of games that do not go through Steam at all.
Oh, okay, interesting.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like they would because it streamlines things. It allows you to use Steam's payment processing, which allows users to have a more streamlined experience. But they don't have to,
Interesting.
as far as I'm aware. Like, I don't know if there's an exact like policy on that, but there are tons of games that literally do not have any hooked up or any stuff hooked up to Steam at all. But
But the other thing too is like, so they're renaming this subscription, right? But Origin Access, like, have they said anything about on Steam? Because I know with Origin Access, there's non EA stuff on there on Origin. So are those games going to be part of it on Steam too, or
I'm
like?
pretty sure they're not. From what I've seen of the preview page, it looks like they're not.
Which makes sense, but also like it seems weird to rename it then. If like, is it going to be two different products still? Like in practice?
I
I don't
I,
know. It's
I
just
think it will. I mean,
that's just yeah, that's so weird. That's just such a weird thing to do.
it really is. And I mean, one of the weirder things though, and something that I'm sure people aren't going to be happy about in the long term is you're going to get exclusive rewards and member-only content with the subscription, but you're also going to get
Yeah.
exclusive in-game challenges, which means there's going to be certain like stuff that you can do in-game, like challenge yourself to do, and you will not be able to do those without the subscription. And that is such a weird thing. Like, I don't know what that means yet. Like, could it mean
Yeah.
that we're just getting like Apex challenges or something? Because they have them for the battle pass. Like, are we just going to get more if we pay for the subscription? But it could, or is it going to mean like you have the Ubisoft Club reward things where you do X
Oh
amount of
yeah.
stuff in game and you get stuff back for that then you can use on more in-game content, and it's kind of a cycle. Like, is that
Yeah.
going to be the kind of thing that we're going to get? I mean, there are so many things they could do with this, and I don't know that it's going to go over well that it's locked behind a subscription.
Yeah. I really want to know what that stuff is because I was reading that and I'm trying to think of like what exactly that means, but it can mean so many different things. So, but I don't recall. Do we know when that's actually launching yet on Steam?
On Steam,
Like
I don't
when?
know, but they're changing the branding on the 18th, so I would assume that was when the Steam thing is also going to go live.
Okay.
It would make sense, at least.
Yeah, it would. So it's
Anyways,
not too far off.
nope. Anyways, so now that we've gone over that briefly, we should more specifically talk about Apex, because they finally dropped the trailer for Season 6 that answers a lot of our questions, and I have been openly critical on Twitter and other places of the idea of crafting in Apex, and I think they may have found a solution that I am okay with. Like, it's not something I'm happy about, but it feels like it will slot into the game naturally. And the way that they're doing that is, it looks like you pick up resources as you play the game. We're not really sure about how yet because it's just a trailer. And then you can spend those resources on a specific set of items that can be crafted that are just normal items that you find throughout the game, like mods or guns or I think even ammo. But you go to a station, like a crafting station, and there's a specific set that it has that you can pull from. And the crafting stations look like they're dropped the same way that care packages are. So it kind of looks like there's a certain element of randomness, like you don't just have um, crafting materials and then you go to the same place every time, kind of like in Fortnite before they added the mobile ones that you can throw onto the ground.
Yeah.
So it looks like there is some level of balance. It's not a thing that you're going to rely on, is what it looks like. It looks like a thing that you can do if you're already behind, and I'm okay with that. Only if
Yeah.
I'm right about the drops, though.
Yeah, we'll have to see about that. But the one thing that's weird about it is it seems like some of the stuff is going to be changing over time. So, from what I remember, there was some stuff that said permanent, as in, like, seems like those will always be things that you can get, like, I think armor and stuff like that. But then there was stuff that said daily, which means, like, maybe that changes out every day, which would be kind of weird. Like, I think the gun was, like, a daily thing.
Yeah.
So that could change things up. Like, if you have a strategy like I always want this gun and you can't find it, then, maybe that's a more reliable way for you to always be able to execute that strategy to some extent. If there's a loadout that you really like.
Yeah.
But I think it really comes down to how cumbersome this is to interact with, because definitely when they talked about crafting in Apex, I wasn't really excited about it, and I was a bit worried because I didn't really want like a weird thing where there's different kinds of materials you have to pick up, or where it's this annoying thing, because like the way that the inventory works in Apex is so different than Fortnite, for instance. And I was worried it would be a really cumbersome thing to deal with. But if it ends up being like the crafting materials, you just get them from the loot bins or whatever, kind of the same way that the treasure packs just pop out alongside the other stuff, then that sounds okay. But also, I hope that the materials don't replace any drops, either like just stuff lying on the ground or in the bins, because I think that would be very annoying. Especially like, at the very start of a match, just imagining like, sometimes there's unlucky times where your building doesn't have a gun as it is. I would find it infuriating if you drop somewhere and not only was there not a gun, instead there's just a bunch of crafting crap everywhere
Well,
that you'll never get to
especially if
use.
they're drops, like
Yeah,
especially if it's like the care packages and you have to find one, and it's not
yeah,
in the same place every time.
yeah. That's why I really hope it's like, if it's like a treasure pack where it just comes out alongside the other stuff, but it doesn't replace any drops in the bin or anything, that sounds fine. And that sounds like whatever. Because I think it should be something that you should be able to ignore without it being annoying. Like if you don't want to deal with that. In the same way that you don't have to go for a care package if you don't want to, but you
Yeah,
can.
yeah, and the other thing about that is that if it does come out of the supply crates like the treasure packs did, it would be on theme for the way that the game has been going because the treasure packs were specific to this season. Like it was a
Right.
specifically Loba release thing. So if they just replaced that every season with something different, it would be on theme.
Yeah.
And it would make a lot of sense if they did that. But yeah, I mean, I also found it interesting that they specifically seem to have revealed that the turbocharger and the devotion are going back into rotation. And that's pretty
Yeah.
significant because previously the turbocharger, when the devotion became one of the gold guns, just didn't exist. It was
Yeah.
nowhere to be found anymore, which put Havoc users at a disadvantage because you could no longer get rid of that spin up at the beginning. You only had the select fire. So you can only choose between the one beam attack or waiting to spin up. So it's going to be interesting to see that back in rotation. Now that
On the other hand, like what impacts does that have? Like, I feel like with the devotion coming back and with the turbocharger coming back and with the new gun, the Volt, the energy SMG that they've talked about, like maybe it will be a heavily energy weapon dominated season because the new gun is an energy weapon, and the turbocharger coming back on the Havoc is, and on the devotion, is like a big power boost to those guns, right? And right now they are presumably, they've been balancing those guns around that not existing. So it seems like it'll probably be very strong.
Yeah, it will be interesting to see how that changes. I mean, at the very least, now that we've had all of the snipers moved into, sniper territory, there won't be
Yeah.
an energy weapon sniper that dominates as well. So there is
Well,
that guarantee at least.
yeah, true. But the interesting thing about the snipers is that I learned is that they actually still perform the same way that they always did. Like the triple take was an energy weapon originally, and it's like its rules follow the rules of energy stuff. Whereas like the longbow fires the same way that heavy guns fire, things like that. So, but anyway,
Yeah, so also though, I am curious how the new character is going to play out
yeah,
because it seems like she's very support heavy despite being like technically offense defense between the two different abilities. She does seem very support heavy, and the reason for that is she can drop a turret that anyone can jump on, but then she also has a shield that, I mean, I know you haven't played it, but it's very similar to one of the characters in Rogue Company, where it has like the window at the top and then the
yeah,
bottom part is just solid. And I'm very curious to see how this plays out in real time because it looks like she can put up multiple shields. So you can have your entire
yeah.
team like guarded and then just a turret behind it. And I'm wondering if people are going to use that in the end game to camp a lot. So, and I'm wondering how powerful this turret is, how much ammo it has, like how long it stays online, whether you can replace it. There are a lot of things that we don't know about this ability yet that whether or not it will be annoying will be predicated on the answers.
Can you imagine that combined with like Watson fences everywhere or like the caustic gas traps everywhere? Like it seems definitely like something that could be really strong and very difficult to push into, especially if you have like the energy fencing and maybe if you had like the Watson ultimate near the turret, because it seems like one of the ways to deal with the turret would be to throw a grenade at it to force the person that's on it out of it or something, but or maybe to blow up the turret depending on how it works. But like I don't know. It seems definitely like something that could be super strong. Or something else that people mention is like, what if Gibraltar throws down his shield in such a way that they can shoot you with the turret, but you can't shoot them? Like, is that possible? Things like that. Like, there's a lot of interactions that I really wonder about.
Yeah, and then also one of the things that I was just thinking as you were saying that, like, what if you can end up using the shield to block off like doorways? Because when we played Hyperscape, for example, one of the big
Ugh.
things that it had was, the wall ability. It couldn't block like all the way up to a ceiling. Like it literally only came up to like knee height at most if you put it inside a building. So what if the new shield that Rampart has can instead block off doors entirely?
Yeah. I feel like there has to be a way to break through, but I just, yeah, it would be, I don't know. I don't know. There's so many questions, and I really want to know more about the Volt too. Like, I want to see how that gun works and see how it performs and what that's like.
Yeah, I mean, it looks basically just like an energy SMG just off the bat, but it will be interesting to see, especially like what the recoil is like because it's an energy weapon and not a physical weapon. I'm
Yeah.
curious to know what that's going to be like.
Well, and I don't recall seeing this off the top of my head, but people were talking about the possibility of there being an extended energy mag too that could exist. I don't. I wish I could remember where I saw that,
Please
but
don't let that be on the turbocharger. I mean, not the turbocharger, the devotion. God damn it.
yeah, yeah. But I mean, yeah. Please don't let that be on the devotion or the havoc. Honestly, with the turbocharger, either of those.
Oh
But
god, they have the
I
L
don't
Star
know.
now too.
Oh yeah, there's the All Star. Yeah, I want. I don't even know. But like in terms of like, so what did you think of this season from what you played? And like, do these kinds of changes like pull you in anymore? Like, do you find it more interesting than what you played of this season, or like, what do you feel about that?
Well, I mean, this season just felt like smoother overall. Like when they first added World's Edge, I hated World's Edge. Like the
Yeah,
entire design of the map was a mess. And I just constantly felt like I was being walled off by the mountains and everything and forced to go
yeah,
specific ways that I was always getting shot. And they've redesigned it in a way that it feels a lot better to maneuver around. So, I mean, a lot of the changes they've made have just been overall positive. And like, I don't know, it's not really down to mechanics like for the hero or the legends and stuff that were keeping me away before. It was the battle pass design, it was the level design. Having to play World's Edge exclusively before they added both of them into rotation was just
yeah,
not
for sure.
fun when they were first starting it out. And like, it's this it's the features around the game that have changed that make it much more appealing now. And so
Yeah.
it's more like these changes don't feel like they're going to push me away yet more than they draw me in.
Okay. Yeah, that's a fair answer. One thing that I've always liked, like I know there's certain legends which are, if you look at win rates or whatever, just better than others at whatever levels of play, like high level play or whatever. But at least for me, just playing it kind of casually, I don't feel like there's been any legends so far that they've added which are just hugely overpowered, which is nice. Like it feels like you can play any of them and be fine. And although some stuff is definitely hard to deal with at times, it always feels pretty fair, at least to me. Like with like as frustrating as Caustic is, for instance, when you need to push into a building that he's in or something, like you have an idea of how to deal with it, and it does feel fair because or and so I just hope that the new hero feels like that too, like
Yeah.
that they're not too overwhelming, is what I'm saying. Because so far, I think they've done a pretty good job with they all feel fair,
Yeah, and I
or
mean,
eventually they've gotten to a point where they feel fair.
yeah, and on that note, I mean, like, I love playing Loba and all, but like, she's so like weird in terms of playstyle that even the teleport isn't overpowered because you have to wait for it to drop, right? And if
Yeah,
you drop it manually, you don't go as far, and it can only be thrown in a specific arc that doesn't like cover a whole lot of space. And there's a cooldown when you actually teleport so that you can't immediately start shooting people right afterwards. And I've actually died because of that.
and
And
it's very
like
visible too.
yeah, it is very visible, and it makes that shing kind of sound that
Yeah.
everybody can hear. And I mean, it's just so balanced because of all those features that, like, I mean, I have faith because that is the most recent hero that it will be balanced, the new one.
Yeah.
But I'm also seeing a lot of problems that I think may need balancing once people actually get a hold of it.
Yeah, I think it depends because the turret does sound very powerful on paper, but I also like think about it and like can you just be insta killed via a headshot from a sniper or something while you're sitting up there? Because Apex is all about the mobility. So I think it really depends like how all the interactions play out in practice because the turret seems very powerful, but it also seems like you could be very vulnerable too. So I wonder like how like if the walls aren't too overpowering, I think it could be balanced and able to play around.
Well, on that note, the walls actually do from the trailer look like they are very deliberately shorter than the turret.
Right.
So, I mean, it may be that you're right, that they want you to just stay still and get shot.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that's about all I have to say on that. You?
Yeah, pretty much. I'm excited for it, but also I need to see like how the stuff actually plays out, and hopefully it's as smooth as it was this season because I actually really enjoyed this season overall.
Well, at least we've only got like, what, 3 days until we find out?
I don't recall. Yeah, something like that. Yeah,
Yeah,
I think
so
it's on the 17th.
it'll be pretty quick. Anyways,
Yeah.
so that's all the news for this week. We're gonna talk now about Remnant a little bit because it was free on the Epic Game Store, and I finally got a chance to play it. And honestly, I don't usually like Souls-likes. I don't like them because they ask you to learn a bunch of very specific situations and learn about or rely on muscle memory rather than in the moment decision making. And I hate the idea of just practicing over and over until muscle memory takes over. I'd rather it be because I didn't make the right decision. Obviously, something like a fighting game is a different story where you have to have both. But like for the majority of things like Souls likes, it's down to muscle memory, and I don't tend to like that. But I've been enjoying Remnant, and part of that might be the gun focus, where I feel like I have more time to just sit there and think about what I'm gonna do, and it's I don't know. I actually like the way it feels. I love the kind of like Wild West post-apocalypse aesthetic, and like there's a specific character that I even tweeted about, but named Mudtooth or something like that.
Yeah.
And just the interaction with him is one of the most genuine interactions I have ever seen in a game, and it might be one of my favorite moments of all time. Just like hidden in this game that's like mostly Souls-like dreariness.
Yeah.
It was just such a great moment, and I did not expect that. But yeah, I've been enjoying it.
Yeah, I think it's really cool because I think it's a lot of people tend to describe it as like, oh, it's Dark Souls with guns, which I think is actually a pretty big disservice because they do so much to make it not just that. Like, I don't think it really plays in that same way because of the way that, because you're shooting, but also just all the different mechanics around the edges. Like, you have all these abilities that you can pop off with, and you have like let's say if you go down, it's not the end if you go down. Like you don't automatically get reset, at least in co-op. Like your partner or partners have a chance to get you back up so you can keep going. So you don't just lose all that progress and have to go back to the last checkpoint or whatever. And I think one really cool thing that it does that, you know, if you're just playing it, you probably don't even notice is that it the kind of procedural generation that it does in such a way that you will not encounter everything there is in the game on your first time through. Like the the bosses that you encounter will not always be the same. Some of them are, I'm pretty sure, because some of them, like the ones that have big story significance, I believe are always the same. But um, you know, the fact that, let's say you and your friend are playing together, and maybe one of you has played before, and it's not just the exact same thing. I think that does so much to keep it fresh and to keep it interesting, really, because you're not just going through the same thing over again.
And actually, like, on that note, I wanted to talk about, it's actually so well designed for co-op. So the procedural generation aspect of it, and the fact that everyone has their own different world that you're playing in, may elicit a feeling of State of Decay 2 for the people that have played that. But that's not how it works. You share progression in a way that is just very comfortable. Basically, everything that you find in the world automatically gets shared between all members of your group. Like, not everyone doesn't have to pick it up. Literally, one person picks it up, and everyone gets it. That means guns. That means crafting resources. That means tomes that give you trait points. Everything is shared, except for ammo. And, like, it... From the ground up, this was made for co-op, and it is very refreshing because, like, we already don't get enough co-op games, in general. Like, there's so much that has advanced in online play, and yet everything is so starkly focused on the whole competitive aspect of everything. So we already don't get enough co-op games. But then so many of these co-op games don't really account for co-op. Like, you don't play, like, together with people. At times you're almost playing against them to get the resources you need. And it just feels great that Remnant has taken all of that into consideration. And one of my favorite systems isn't even about that, but, like, the Dragon Heart system, the health potion equivalent, like, so you actually have normal health potions too, but Dragon Hearts restore and more than normal health potions, and they regen every time you stop at a checkpoint, up to whatever your maximum is. But not only do they regen your health, the Dragon Hearts also serve as the amount of times that you can res friends.
Yes.
So, what your healing that gets regenerated and your reses are shared by the same pool. And it's tense, and I really like it. Like, I don't know why I like something that's so incredibly limited, but, like, it feels interesting that you have to manage that. And you're managing that resources more than you're managing something like stamina.
I think it's kind of cool because it almost makes you feel guilty at times if you end up taking a ton of damage, because then you're like, well, let's say I only have one left. I don't really want to just use it, because what if I need to get my friend up or whatever? Like, it's kind of a little bit of riskiness, I guess, because if you just pop them all, then you can't get your friend up if they go down, or they can't get you up if they've used all theirs. So I think that's kind of cool, the way that works. And I also think that it does a pretty good job of, like, I really tend to dislike a lot of the time when you have very limited bullets in games, because I hate running out. I hate that feeling, because I know it's supposed to introduce tension, but it can also make it very boring, at least for me, because I want to shoot in the shooting game. And this game has limited ammo to some extent, but I think they do a pretty good job of, like, you might get pretty low after a rough encounter, but you never have a situation, really, or you're never forced to have a situation where you have none. Like, you always have some kind of options, because you can buy those ammo packs to carry around, or enemies drop ammo, like, just enough where you kind of have to be willing to switch between your two weapons, or you might even run out for a weapon, but you at least have something, which I think helps with the tension, but doesn't get to that point where it's frustrating.
Yeah, and on that note, it is very cleverly balanced, at least on normal, because one of the things I noticed is one of the bosses that I went up against, the Ent. I don't know if you faced that one or if it's a story one or whatever. It feels very easy if you keep moving, but the moment you stop moving, everything in that boss fight just falls apart, because there are just constant like root rot AoEs going on. There's constant the explosive root rot mushroom things coming at you, and like if you keep moving, it's like, oh well, this is a breeze. But the moment you stop moving, it just like slams you very hard. Everything.
Well, and something that I really like about that too is, it's not always the case, but in a lot of the Souls games that I've played, there are things that will basically straight up one-shot you from full health at times. In a lot of them. Not in all of them, but at points in many of them. Whereas, at least so far in this, like, especially in the fight with the Ent, we'll say, you can get in a situation where, let's say you get staggered from something, and then you take a lot of damage, and then you also have no stamina, and you're in like a really rough and tense spot, but you don't just straight up die because you made one mistake. Like, the mistake hurts you a lot, and it can be really hard to dig yourself out of that, especially in that fight where there's so many enemies running around and so many explosions going off everywhere, and you need to keep moving, but you just ran out of stamina or whatever because you mismanaged it. But there's pretty much always a way to dig yourself out of it, which again can really help make it feel very tense and a little bit stressful in a good way, but doesn't feel as unfair as some stuff in other games does, where you just get like insta killed by something.
Yeah, and especially with how long that fight in specific is, like if you got one shot right near the end just because you happen to misstep, oh god, would that feel bad.
Oh, you mean like in the Surge, the final boss that I had to try like 50 times? Yeah.
Or like the Sekiro one where you beat one boss and then go to another boss that then one-shots you because you were worn out from the first boss.
Oh yeah, that can feel bad. But I don't know, it's just crazy because I think I think a lot of people in game communities actually kind of do games a disservice by the way that they offhandedly describe them sometimes. But like I think calling this, like a Dark Souls with guns is like the biggest disservice I've seen in a while for a game, because I think a lot of people do that just, off the cuff because they know what they mean by that. But I think calling it that can be very unappealing. But it's not that. Like, it's so much more designed to be played with other people, and it's not that kind of experience. Like, it has some of those elements, but it's not that.
Yeah, if I went into it only because it was free, I'm going to be completely honest. I would not have paid money for this knowing that people had called it Dark Souls with guns. And honestly, I am kind of ashamed that I just didn't do the research and just kind of went, oh, it's Dark Souls with guns, and walked away, because it really is such a different experience, and it's such like an interesting experience. Like the world is so specifically built. Like there was so much care that went into the exact way that the apocalypse happened, the exact way that like people act in the apocalypse. Like the whole like morality of it is questioned on multiple occasions by multiple characters, and it really was very carefully designed, and it does it's not Dark Souls with guns. Let's just put it that way. It's a difficult game with stamina management and the checkpoint system, but it takes very little else from Dark Souls. And like if you're listening to this and you sit there and you're thinking, okay, I would love another co-op game, but I don't want to play a Dark Souls game, give it a shot while it's free. You might as well.
Yeah, I think it's probably, at least for me, I unfortunately just got Remnant like recently, so I could have. But anyway, um, if like I'd say it's probably, at least in my opinion, like the best or one of the best games that Epic has given away so far. And I was really surprised to see that it was going to be given away, given how good of a game that it is.
I wonder how much they're paying for that. Because don't they pay, like, out of pocket for every one of the free copies that is claimed?
Yeah, I don't know how it works. I'm pretty sure some maybe it differs because the Total War one was 7.5 million copies, I think. So
At
I feel like,
$50 a piece, that would be kind of insane.
yeah, I feel like there's no way it was that, but I don't know. I would love to know that because, yeah, like a lot of these games must be like millions of copies claimed, especially this one, or like Grand Theft Auto, stuff like that. I can't imagine how much that must cost.
Yeah. And, I mean, just to digress a little, I'm actually interested to know how the Total War thing happened in the first place, because it is an experimental title in that series, because it's a saga title,
Yeah,
and one of the things I've seen people say is that they use these titles as like a testing ground for new mechanics, and people were theorizing that they used Troy as a testing ground for new siege mechanics, which a lot of people think desperately needed reworked. So I'm interested to know if they kind of came up with this idea on their own, like to just
right,
put it out for free as a testing kind of thing.
right. Yeah, I mean, who knows? But it would be cool to know. But unfortunately, I don't think we ever will.
But yeah, back to Remnant. I don't know. I'm really pleasantly surprised with it, and I love the aesthetic. Like, it kind of brings, when you're running around the city areas, especially, it kind of feels a lot like the Division, except for
Yes.
taken over by this like extremely like fantastical version of nature.
Yeah.
And it's a crazy feeling, especially with like all the reds and pinks everywhere. Like, it just looks so like fantastical, but also like it feels plausible at the same time.
Yeah. I don't know. I just really don't have much bad to say about it at all. Like it seems to run really nicely. The co-op experience is so smooth. Like one of my favorite games ever is the original Dark Souls, and I love playing that with people, but co-op in that game is such a pain in the ass. And I just like in pretty much every FromSoft game, it's always way more annoying than it needs to be. And then I play this, and I'm just like, man, I wish it was always as easy as this. Like, it's so smooth. It all makes sense. It
It
feels
doesn't make you
like,
disadvantage yourself to summon a friend.
yeah. And it just, I don't know, like, yeah, like everything about it is nice. Like I really like the sounds. I really like it. It's very atmospheric. Like, I don't know. I think it's really cool. And there's so much lore too. There's like a ton of it everywhere if you want to engage with that, but you don't have to, which I actually like because I don't. At least on my first playthrough, I don't really care. At least when I'm playing with a friend, because there's all that. Like, there's books everywhere that have like way
Computer
more
terminals.
pages. Yeah, that have like way more text than you'd expect. Like, there's like a lot. So it's nice to be able to just kind of skip it, and then maybe I'll play it again at some point, and then go through that more thoroughly. But I like when games go down that route instead of having like all these long cutscenes that they want you to watch, because sometimes you just don't want to. Like when you're playing co-op or whatever, maybe you just want to skip that so you can keep going, or not. Like but it's just it feels so well put together, and I believe they still have more DLC coming for it at some point, and I'm interested to see like what that ends up being, because I think they did the one that they did already was kind of like a smaller one, and they have like a larger one coming with more. I'm not sure if it's more story for sure yet, or what, because I mean, I haven't beaten the game yet either, but I'm I feel like I'll definitely want to play that if it's as good as this.
Yeah. And I mean, like it's just nice to see that somebody is taking things from Souls-like and making them like more accessible in a lot of ways, because Souls-likes are well and good for their audiences, but like the overall genre has not evolved that much. Like, they adhere to a strict set of formats, and that those formats usually revolve around, you know, the checkpoints, if they have
Yeah,
co-op, the impossible to ever maintain co-op, the very difficult bosses that just require you to play over and over and over and over until you're sick of the game, and just stuff like that. Like, they
yeah,
all follow this same format, but there's a lot that this genre does specifically that had not been taken and put into other places. And I'm really glad to see Remnant being one of those games.
Well, and I think there's something to be said for the idea of like it letting you pick a difficulty level at the start, and I'm pretty sure I'm just on normal too for the first time. Um, and that's cool because it still feels challenging on your first time, but not like so much where it feels like you have to do the same boss like 10 times before you can get past it, which I like because, if you really enjoy the game after playing it through that way, then you can turn it up and you can do it again. And I like that. Whereas, sometimes with, like, I play a lot of difficult games and I like that, but sometimes also I do really just wish that I could, move forward. So I think it's cool that this has, kind of a difficulty setting and you can adjust it or you can take on extra challenges of your own in that way. But
Yeah.
it's not like your first time you have to do that.
Yeah.
I think that's cool because not everybody likes that.
But also, like, sometimes you pick, like, hard, for example, and you're fine for 1/4 of the game, and then you just hit a fucking difficulty wall, and you're like, why did I do this to myself?
That was me with the God of War, the latest God of War, because there's the difficulty setting that has a disclaimer, and I was like, yeah, whatever, and then I was doing it, and it was so hard. It's easily the hardest thing I've ever played. And I had to give up because it was too hard.
Anyways, yeah, so if you're interested in Remnant, be sure to grab it on the Epic Game Store while it's free until, what is next Thursday? It is the 20th is when it's going to not be free anymore.
I mean, I would say do that with every game anyway, because you might as well, but like especially with this one, it is so worth it. And even if you don't really want the Epic launcher, I would say just try it. Just try Remnant because it's so good. Like, it's one of my favorite games that I've played in a while, especially for co-op because it does it so well.
Just treat it as a demo if you really want to, and then buy it on Steam. Anyways, so that is our podcast for the week. Take care, everyone, and see you next week.
Yeah, see you.